Hi guys, welcome back. And after just finishing The Stand by Stephen King, which took a couple weeks to finish, was able to, in just a couple days, plow through the next book for the review today, and that is Malorie, aka Bird Box 2. Now, if you did not read Bird Box or watch the movie and you don't want spoilers, thank you for watching or listening, but I'd encourage you to leave because it's a sequel. It's going to be hard to not spoil Bird Box once I start talking about Malorie. And later on in the video, I'll give you a warning, but I'll be talking through some spoilers regarding Malorie. And so that way, if you have already read it and want to interact a little bit more about it, we can do that down in the comments. So, Malorie by Josh Malerman, the sequel to the smash hit Bird Box, which became a Netflix movie with Sandra Bullock. Now, again, if you didn't read the Bird Box or watch the movie, this is probably your time to tuck away because once I start talking, you're going to know how Bird Box ends. So, Bird Box ends with Malorie and two children, who for the majority of Bird Box are simply known as boy and girl, until the very end when they arrive at the School for the Blind, where she gives them the names Olympia and Tom. So the house that she was staying in during the majority of Bird Box obviously gets overrun by a creature, thanks to Gary, and everybody in the house dies. Gary runs off to who knows where, and Malorie is the only survivor along with the two children, Olympia's daughter, whom she adopts, and then her own child, Tom. And they stay there at that house for 4 years, after which time they go to the School for the Blind. They get in a boat and go down the river on this journey to the School for the Blind, where when the children were born, they had radio contact with someone there, inviting them to come because they've made it a safe place. And so after raising the kids for 4 years and teaching them how to survive in a world where you can't look or see, Malorie gets them in the boat and they sail down, face some hardships along the way, but finally make their way to the School for the Blind, where they find shelter and a safe community to live with. That brings us to the very start of Malorie, which begins with a bang because it starts with the School for the Blind already being under attack. The School for the Blind, a creature has gotten in, and now the same chaos that happened in the house that Malorie stayed has now taken over the School for the Blind. Now, this brings up an interesting scenario because the initial intrigue with the School for the Blind was if you're blind, you can't see the creatures and they can't drive you to suicidal madness. So, what's happening now? Is there a new level to the threat that the creatures pose? Won't get into that right now. So Malorie finds the children in the midst of the chaos, and after 2 years of living at the School for the Blind, they head out. And they end up in an abandoned summer camp. And they spend the next 10 years at the summer camp. And while at the summer camp, a man happens to wander through, and he's knocking on doors, and he claims to be with the census. Now, obviously, there's no longer a government. Things have gone awry, but he is trying to get a sense of how many survivors are out there, where they are, how they're getting along. So Malorie has the choice of, do I trust him or do I not? And she doesn't. Sends him away, but he does leave some of the information that he's been compiling. And Malorie's son Tom is getting very restless with living in this blindfolded world, and he's desperately trying to find ways to survive and thrive in this new world. And so he's very intrigued by the idea of survivors. Not only survivors, but also according to the information that the census man drops off, there are communities where people are living amongst creatures and they're not going mad. They're not committing suicide. They're not lashing out in violence toward others. Some communities claim to have captured a creature, and so there's all these rumors that you can survive with the creatures and not have to live in darkness with a blindfold. So this really captures Tom's heart, and he is now bent on wanting to get to these communities. Well, in the midst of the papers, as they read through the list of survivors, there are two names on there. I won't say who they are right now. Two names that Malorie recognizes and she desperately wants to connect with. And so they begin a trek to head out to find these other two survivors to see if they're still alive after all these years. It's now been 17 years since the creatures first came and everything went haywire. So there's no guarantee that these two people are still alive, but she needs to find out. And so they gather their stuff and the three of them head out on another journey. So that's where I'm going to pause it in terms of spoiler level 1, because I don't want to get much more beyond that and give too much away. In short, I liked it. I liked it a lot. I think it was a lot of fun. Was it as good as Bird Box? No, because I think Bird Box was so new and so just this new adventure that there was a little bit more excitement and some uncertainty, but this wasn't far behind. This was a very satisfying follow-up, and I feel like it I feel like it brings the story to a close. Now, will I be upset if there's a third? No, because I give this one 4 stars. Wasn't perfect. I'll get into a couple of the issues more specifically in the spoiler section, but I think one thing for me, and it may have just been me, again, it may have just been me, it may have nothing to do with the book itself. Others might feel differently. There are 2 issues, actually. One issue was there is a pseudo love interest, a new love interest for Mallory, someone that she's kind of drawn to, attracted to. That felt a little bit rushed. It didn't feel authentic because there wasn't enough to go on for there to be any kind of connection with her and this other person. But the second issue, I think the main issue for me, was the ending. I like the ending, but I feel like it happened very fast. I remember at one point reading and getting close to the end of the book and thinking, how in the world is all of this going to wrap up in 50 pages maybe? And there's kind of a lot. It's a very chaotic ending, I will say that. And so it feels kind of like you're building up and then boom, and it's just done. So I feel like there was... for me, I would have enjoyed if it just draw that out a little bit more, give me time to really absorb what's happening. But the pace that it went, it did also kind of add into just the chaos of what was happening at the conclusion of the book. So again, it may have just been me. It may have been an intentional choice. I wasn't always sure if I knew what exactly was happening because there weren't a lot of details being given on the ending. But that being said, the positives far outweigh the negatives. There are some nice twists. As I mentioned before, the fact that the people at the School for the Blind were also being affected by the creatures. There's this new level of, is it not just sight? Is there something else that is putting people at risk? So that elevates it. The creatures have multiplied, and so there's more of them in the world. There are people out there. And obviously with any kind of post-apocalyptic scenario, the question becomes, are they good, are they bad? Or in Malorie's perspective, are they safe or unsafe? And for her, there's really no good people, bad people. It's just safe people, unsafe people. But one thing I liked about Bird Box and I really like about Malorie is we still only ever know as much about the creatures as the characters, specifically Malorie. And so, yeah, so we don't really get a whole lot. And I know some of the complaints about the book is we still don't know anything about the creatures. I kind of like that because the characters don't. The characters don't know where these creatures came from. The characters don't know why looking at the creatures drives you to madness. There's so many unanswered questions for the characters that I enjoyed being in that in those shoes with them, of not knowing what was happening and why it was happening. So for me, that was a strength. That wasn't a weakness. The relationship with Malorie and the children is very pins and needles at times. Obviously, she is still hardcore survival, live by the fold, always have your blindfold. She's very militant about that. The kids are just sick of it already. They're 16. They're tired of living this way. It's all they've ever known. And they hear that there's people thriving out there and they want to be a part of that. And so that dynamic becomes very, really is a thread throughout the entire book of just this tension with Malorie and the children. So really enjoyed it. If you like Bird Box, I really think you're going to enjoy this. I've seen some reviews. Some people hated it. I really liked it. It was a very satisfying follow-up to Bird Box. I wouldn't mind if there's a third. I don't know if there will be. Wouldn't mind. Really enjoyed that one as well. So two great books by Josh Malerman. If you haven't read either one, really encourage you to do so. Now, in 5 seconds, I'm going to go into some spoilers. So if you don't want spoilers, now would be your time to click away to another video. Thanks for watching so far, but this is more geared towards those who have either read the book or have no desire to read it and just want to find out what all happened. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, spoilers, last warning, here we go. So Malorie's son Tom is very focused on, he wants to live as normal of a life as possible, and so he has become very inventive and creative in trying to find ways to see the creatures without going insane, so they could stop living with blindfolds on all the time. Olympia, the adopted daughter of Malorie, is she's not as obsessed as Tom is with just getting out into the world. She is more what's the right word? She's more understanding of Malorie, and we find out at the end of the book, I warned you, spoilers, we find out, we get these little hints throughout the story that Olympia is living with secrets. Her big secret is she is born immune to the creatures. Again, we don't know why. It might be because as she was being born, that's when her mother saw a creature, and was it connected to that? We don't know, and the reality is the characters don't know. So again, I think that's a huge strength of this book, and Bird Box and Malorie, is we don't know any more than the characters do, and I kind of enjoyed that. So she's able to see the creatures all along, and so I think that's part of why she can be more sympathetic towards Malorie, because she doesn't live with the same angst that her brother does. Now, her brother, in reading the papers from the census worker, they discover that there's a community called Indian River where they claim to have one in captivity. And so when they leave the summer camp to go find those two people that Malorie wanted to find, those two people are Malorie's mom and dad. Their names appear on the list of survivors. Now, it's Sam and Mary Walsh. It could be anybody, but more than likely her parents. She's got to find out. And so, also in these papers, they find out that there is what's called the blind train. Someone has restored a train, made it creature-proof, so you can't look, all the windows are blocked off, and they're taking rides up and down Michigan. So they decide to make their way to the blind train and take the blind train up to try to find Malorie's parents. So they get to the train, and again we have this tension of who can they trust, who can they not trust. And this is where Malorie meets Dean, who's the guy who restored the train and operates the train, and there's kind of a bit of a romantic connection which kind of comes out of nowhere. They're talking for like 30 seconds, and she's developing feelings for him, which seemed a little weird. Especially, I mean, she's not even looking at him to say like, well, he's really cute or something. This is just like 30 seconds of a conversation, so it felt a little weird, and really not necessary to the overall plot. But Olympia happens to hear word that there's a creature on board the train. This train takes runs back and forth. It delivers things for people, and it will deliver dead bodies in coffins back to family members for burial. And the whisper is that in one of those coffins is a creature. And so, of course, this raises the tension quite a bit. So there's a big fight with Malorie and Tom. She slaps him. He storms off. She regrets it, goes off to try to find him on the train. Olympia's trying to get people to hide because there's a creature on board the train. So in the midst of this chaos, Tom runs into an older gentleman that he and Olympia met earlier while they were on the train, and Malorie's off talking to Dean. And this gentleman he calls himself Henry, but he's actually Gary, the man responsible for everybody dying in the house that Malorie lived in. And it turns out he's kind of been stalking Malorie all this time. So Gary takes Tom and rushes him off the train, and they go to Indian River. Also, Malorie gets kidnapped off the train. So next thing you know, everybody is at Indian River, and it turns out that Tom has been working on glasses made of a two-way mirror. And the thought is that if the creatures look at the two-way mirror glasses and see themselves, somehow that might alter the effect that they have on people who see them. You'll have to read more about the explanation behind that. Again, because we don't know why looking at the creatures drives you mad, sure, this might work. And in the end, Tom is testing out his own experiment. It works. He's able to see a creature without going mad. Malorie gets there just as this is happening. She discovers that her father is there at Indian River. They are reunited. Her mother has already passed away. So all of that, they end up at Indian River, and there's some fanatical people at Indian River, but by and large, it's a relatively safe community. Her mother is buried there, and the community begins to mass produce these glasses that you can wear and not be driven to madness when you see the creatures. And so at this point, they're at Indian River. Everyone's getting these glasses. Malorie finally sees a creature through the glasses. She doesn't go mad. So it looks like people can begin to live normal lives with the creatures, because the creatures just kind of stand there and study people. They don't harm them, they don't attack, they just kind of stand there. So again, a lot of unanswered questions in terms of the creatures. If you're okay with that, I think you'll enjoy Malorie. If you're really hoping for an explanation on the creatures, you're not going to get it here. Personally, I loved it. I enjoyed every bit of it. If you read it, I'd love to interact with you in the comments. If you're on YouTube, let me know what you think. But for me, Malorie by Josh Malerman, 4 stars. Encourage you. Give it a try. Start with Bird Box, though. Make sure you've read Bird Box. If you're still watching and you haven't read Bird Box, I've just ruined everything. Oops. I warned you, though. Anyway, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. If you haven't already, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and we'll catch you back here next time for the next video. Have a great day.